that justice and the concept of punishment is when someone gets what he deserves. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I suppose it depends on what gets what he deserves mean, but yes, I think justice requires individualized determination of the kind of crime you did, and the mitigating circumstances. Yes.
Well, let me put it another way. If is a person who commits a crime a sinner in the moral sense, or a sick person?
Well, this is again probably beyond my competence. I think with justice comes mercy, and so I think we have to take into consideration all different kinds of things. I also think that the kind of crime that we're talking about is relevant to the question of what kind of person it is. So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking me. I'm not trying to be evasive. I just don't know exactly what you're asking me.
Okay. Let me shift gears here.
Yeah.
Were you chief judge when the coronavirus hit us?
Unfortunately for my successor, my term ran out just before coronavirus hit us.
Well, if you had been chief judge,
yes,
would you have adopted a rule that said if one of our employees in the court gets coronavirus and goes to the hospital and is treated and is released and wants to come back to work at the court, it would be discriminatory to ask them to take a coronavirus test?
No.
Okay. Isn't that what happened with a lot of our nursing homes throughout the country?
You know, I honestly don't know what happened with the nursing homes. I don't know what they were doing with respect to I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be evasive.
Sure.
I really don't know the facts here. I mean, I think in the example you gave me, there's nothing discriminatory about asking people who might be infected from a public health point of view to be sure they don't infect other people. And if a determination is made they're not infected, then of course that's the end of it. Equal treatment doesn't mean we don't take into consideration the possibilities of different degrees of health in a particular circumstance. And I honestly don't know what happened with the nursing home. I know that it was terrible that many people got COVID in the nursing homes, and it was a major vector of the spread of the infection. But I don't know why that was, except that there are people cooped up in one place, and it's easy to spread that way.
All right. I think science tells us that keeping our schools closed has a disproportionate impact on poor people and children from poor families, and on families including but not limited to children of color. At what point do you think our refusal of some of our leadership in our schools to reopen becomes a civil rights violation?
So, Senator, I completely agree with your description of the consequences of the school closing. I tutor two children in a neighborhood of Washington, D.C., where most of the students in the school are people of color, and I've been able to tutor them by Zoom every week, but they have, and they're taking classes by Zoom, and it's much more difficult, obviously, for them, although they've done terrifically, not because of me, but they have, than it would be with people with other resources.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I think that, public officials have to weigh very serious competing concerns with respect to how to deal with COVID. There's just no doubt about it. On the one hand, we have to be very worried about sending kids back in their schooling. And on the other hand, we have to be very worried about not spreading the disease in a way that kills them, or more importantly, not more likely, their parents or their grandparents. And I don't want to be the person who makes that judgment.
I understand. I get it. Sorry to interrupt. I hate.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
We just have limited time. You have written in one of your opinions, I'm going to read. I know you haven't memorized all of your opinions. You said the Constitution, quote, does not contemplate that the District of Columbia, may serve as a state for purposes of the apportionment of congressional representatives. That textual evidence is supported by historical evidence concerning the general understanding at the time of the district's creation. Is that still your considered opinion?
Yes, and I would say that is a case, one of my earliest cases, which taught me what it means to be a judge, which is to do something the opposite of what you would do if you had public policy concern. I think that citizens of the District of Columbia should be able to vote, but I didn't think that the Constitution gave me authority on my own to give it to them. And it made me sad, but it reaffirmed my role as a judge.
Okay. In my last 20 seconds, I'm going to ask you if you agree with this statement. Allowing, and I'm not suggesting the answer one way or the other, I just want to know what you believe. Allowing biological males to compete in an all-female sport deprives women of the opportunity to participate fully and fairly in sports and is fundamentally unfair to female athletes.
This is a very difficult societal question that you're asking here. I know what underlies it.
I know, but you're going to be Attorney General.
But I may not be the one who has to make policy decisions like that, but it's not that I'm adverse to it. Look, I think every human being should be treated with dignity and respect. That's an overriding sense of my own character, but an overriding sense of what the law requires. The particular question of how Title IX applies in schools is one, and in light of the Bostock case, which I know you're very familiar with, is something that I would have to look at when I have a chance to do that. I've not had the chance to consider these kinds of issues in my career so far. But I agree that this is a difficult question.
Thank you, Judge.
For his first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't hear you. Did you call me?
I called you Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That sounds very good.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Director, I've listened from my office to your testimony today. Tell me who had the authority to call out the National Guard on January 6th?
My understanding is that the decisions to call out the National Guard, in one sense, are the responsibility of the Secretary of Defense, but in another sense, have to be.
Mr. Director, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think we can agree that the FBI had credible information that there was likely to be violence on January 6th. Can we agree on that?
Well, I don't know that we had assessed its credibility. We certainly had information that was concerning about the potential for violence in connection with the January 6th events. And as we discussed here this morning, one piece of information that was most specific that I'm aware of was passed, quite quickly.
Well, based on that information, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we just keep nibbling at the edges and dancing around the issue. And I understand. I'm not asking you to throw anybody under the bus, Chris. I get it. But we need to find out what happened. Now, if you were king for a day, based on the information that you had, maybe not at the time, but later on, would you have called out the FBI? I mean, the National Guard?
You know, Senator, as you said, I really want to be careful not to be armchair quarterbacking others. I think the National Guard, we have seen, can play a very important role in crowd
control. Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm not trying to be rude, but my time's limited. Well, who made the call not to, based on your information, who made the call not to call out the FBI, whether they should have or shouldn't?
Not to call the FBI?
I'm sorry, I'm tired. The National Guard.
Well, I would defer to others who are more involved in that discussion, but from what I have heard, what I have read, my understanding is that at one stage of the process, the local government was of the view that it did not need the National Guard's assistance.
Who do you mean by the local government? The mayor?
Yes.
So the mayor didn't call out the National Guard?
At the beginning.
What do you mean by the beginning?
Well, in the day or two leading up to the 6th. Okay. Then as to exactly how it played out on the 6th itself,
I understand
I'm not as
but
sure about.
I mean, clearly our people were overrun by the nut jobs. So we're making progress here, okay? So the mayor or the city government decided not to call out the FBI, the National Guard ahead of time. What about the House Sergeant at Arms?
I don't know what role the House Sergeant at Arms played with respect to the National Guard.
Okay. How about the Senate Sergeant?
Same answer.
Okay. How about the Capitol Police, the Chief of Capitol Police? Did the Chief of Capitol Police make the call not to call out the National Guard?
I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is that the law enforcement officials here with responsibility over the Capitol, that there were differing views about whether or not the National Guard was appropriate and when at what level. But all I really know on that is same thing you've seen, in the press coverage of the events.
Okay, that's enough on that. I listened to your comments about diversity, and I thank you for your good work there. I think any fair-minded person has to conclude that diversity is a strength, not a weakness. But this subject comes up a lot, and I think it's going to come up a lot again. And that's not a criticism; that's just an observation. Do you believe that the FBI is a systemically racist institution?
No. Now, having said that, I do believe the FBI needs to be more diverse and more inclusive than it is, and that we need to work a lot harder at that, and we're trying to work a lot harder on that.
Do you believe that the FBI is a systemically sexist or misogynistic institution?
Again, that's not the way I would describe the FBI that I know and see every day. But again, it's a place where we need to be more diverse and inclusive, and we need to work harder at that. And we are working hard at that, and we've got progress that we still need to make to at least to be satisfactory by my standards.
Okay. Fair enough. Mr. Director, have you ever been to Hong Kong?
No.
Wonderful place, wonderful people. The Chinese Communist Party is destroying it. If Congress passed a bill and said to the good people of Hong Kong who yearn for freedom, come to America. We're going to follow our friends in Britain. Say, come here. You want to get out from under the thumb of the Communist Party, come to America. We welcome you. Do you think the FBI and law enforcement has the ability to screen for spies? One of the criticisms of the proposition I just stated is, well, we would be letting in spies. Do you think, based on your knowledge of security, that we could catch most of the spies? Well,
I yield to no one in my faith and confidence in the great work of the men and women of the FBI, but I will tell you that the Chinese counterintelligence threat is the greatest threat, certainly the greatest counterintelligence threat that we face as a country.
Right.
And the sheer number of what we would refer to as non-traditional collectors working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party is something that is a massive resource challenge for the FBI.
That was probably